In a castle cloaked in the gloom of a rainy day, a young girl sat alone in the dimness, her arms folded. She gazed out of the window, observing the storm raging outside with its flashes of lightning and booming thunder. Isabella Brett, her nanny, entered, her face showing concern. "Your Highness," she announced, "it is time for your snack," presenting a cake and tea. However, the girl, Alicia, informed Isabella that she was fine. She pointed out the scarcity of food due to the ongoing war, explaining that a snack would be an extravagant luxury. Isabella visibly shivered at these words. Isabella then reminded her that she was the sole daughter of the Emperor of the Eastern Empire. Despite her young age of 9, she already carried herself with the dignified bearing expected of an imperial family member. Isabella assured her that when His Majesty returned from the battlefield, he would undoubtedly be proud of her. Yet, Alicia offered a small, disbelieving smile and countered that it was unlikely. She pointed out that even as a member of the imperial family, all she truly possessed was an impressive, lengthy name, Alicia de Rivetzer. Furthermore, the man she called father had initiated the war when she was only 6, and 3 years later, it still raged on. As Alicia continued to watch the storm outside, Isabella gently urged her not to worry, expressing confidence that His Majesty would return victorious. Tears welling in her eyes, Isabella vowed to protect Her Highness until her very last breath, should anything happen. Alicia, her voice trembling slightly, responded that it was all right and thanked her. Alicia then fell into thought, reflecting on a time when she possessed magic, believing that she could have ended this war single-handedly. A legend, passed down through generations in the Eastern Empire, spoke of a night witch, a white figure who appeared only on nights of pure white, granting wishes with her boundless power. Unbeknownst to others, this legend was about her. Because of this very legend, people would make sincere requests during full moon nights, hoping the white night witch would hear them and make their wishes come true. She was indeed powerful, but upon awakening as Alicia, she had inexplicably lost all of her magical abilities. She had been reborn as Alicia, the only daughter of a tyrannical emperor who had lost his wife during childbirth. Perhaps blaming her for her mother's death, the emperor had essentially abandoned her in the princess's palace. Consequently, she had spent the last 9 years confined there, never once seeing her father's face. Isabella was the only person who showed her genuine care, a stark contrast to the rejection she felt even from her own bloodline. Her nanny, Isabella, was the only person in the entire palace who truly loved her. Isabella observed the heavy rain and gently draped a cloth around Alicia, cautioning her to be careful not to catch a cold in such weather. Alicia felt a surge of gratitude and warmth for Isabella's kindness. Suddenly, a noise broke through her thoughts, drawing her attention back to the outside. She turned her head towards the large window on the side. The already somber atmosphere of the palace, a consequence of the war, deepened further with the drumming of raindrops against the windows, accompanied by the oppressive dark clouds. The ominous rumble of the clouds soon escalated into a blinding flash of lightning, followed by an ear-splitting thunderclap that reverberated through the room. Isabella cried out in surprise, the sound piercing Alicia's ears. Isabella exclaimed about how frightened she had been by the sudden thunder. Alicia wondered what the noise had been just now, then lowered her head, a slight shudder passing through her. It took Isabella a moment to recover from the shock induced by the thunder. She then moved to close the curtains, asking the princess when she thought the war might finally end. Alicia replied that she was unsure, perhaps soon. Just then, their conversation was interrupted by a deafening bang. The door burst open, accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps echoing in the corridor. A knight, his expression frantic and clearly out of breath, shouted towards Her Highness. He was trembling, while Isabella, indignant, demanded to know the meaning of this disrespect, questioning how he dared to barge into the princess's palace. The knight finally managed to speak, uttering the news of His Majesty the Emperor's fate, announcing that he had fallen in battle, leaving Isabella utterly shocked. Alicia internally noted that at the tender age of 9, she had become an orphan. Simultaneously, she felt the power she had once lost returning to her. The guard continued, explaining that they had fortunately won the war, but in the final, decisive battle, His Majesty the Emperor. Alicia cut him off, abruptly asking the man his name. The knight appeared confused by the sudden question but answered, "Sybil Zip." Alicia rose from her seat and approached him, inquiring if Mr. Zip was from the 5th Division of Knights. He confirmed that he was. She then stated that there was something he had forgotten. A little nervous, he asked what she meant. Alicia declared that regardless of the urgency of the situation, barging into the princess's chambers without even seeking permission was unacceptable. She questioned in what country such behavior was considered appropriate. The guard's face drained of color with fright, and he wondered if the princess had always been like this. As she started walking towards him, he visibly panicked and quickly dropped to his knees, profusely apologizing. Alicia remarked that just because she was a princess confined within this palace, it did not give him the right to look down upon her. She then swept past him, with Isabella trailing behind in stunned silence. Alicia thought to herself with a hint of glee that now, with the emperor's sudden demise, and with no other children or nurtured heirs in the picture, given how events had unfolded, she saw no reason why she shouldn't aim to become the empress. Isabella, meanwhile, ran desperately after her, repeatedly asking where she was going. The palace was thrown into complete chaos by the unexpected news of the emperor's death. Ministers were in a frenzy, urgently demanding that they decide on the succession to the throne as quickly as possible. The late emperor himself had ascended to power at a young age, notoriously eliminating all of his blood relatives with his own hands. Consequently, there was practically no collateral line of succession that could inherit the throne. This situation caused even greater turmoil, as no one had anticipated that the emperor would go to war and actually die. The conference room devolved into pandemonium as ministers raised their voices, engaging in heated arguments amongst themselves. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the conference room as the door was forcefully opened with a final, echoing scream, abruptly silencing the chaotic debate as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown over the room. Through the cloud of dust stirred up by the door's forceful entry, a clear voice cut through the stillness. "Why are you searching so far afield when I am right here?" the voice inquired. Though spoken softly, it held an undeniable air of majesty. It was unmistakably the voice of a young girl. Emerging calmly through the settling dust was a small figure, a girl with radiant silver hair and striking pink eyes. A ripple of unease spread through the conference room at the sound of this unfamiliar voice, heard for the first time. Confusion etched upon their faces, the ministers shifted uncomfortably until one, turning towards the central dais, demanded to know who dared to occupy Her Majesty Alicia's seat. There, in the emperor's usual place, sat the young girl, legs crossed and arms folded, an air of regal arrogance about her as she silently scrutinized their bewildered expressions. These were faces she was indeed seeing for the very first time. In the ensuing silence, a minister's voice boomed, ordering everyone to look at her hair. He pointed out the unmistakable silver, identical to Her Majesty's, and even those pink eyes, an exact match. He stammered, a dawning realization in his voice, asking if it could possibly be Princess Alice. Alice responded with a hint of sarcasm, asking if they were only just now realizing it. Observing their clearly displeased expressions, she inquired, "What is the problem?" A man slammed his fist on the table in disgust, his voice rising in anger. He declared that a woman as emperor was utterly unacceptable, and furthermore, she was merely a princess in name, having been confined to the princess's palace her entire life. He challenged how a princess who had never ventured beyond the palace walls could possibly become empress, his tone laced with scorn. With unwavering firmness, Alicia questioned which family he represented. The man visibly shuddered, asking her to repeat herself. She simply reiterated her question, demanding his name, plunging the room into stunned silence. A hushed whisper broke the quiet, someone remarking if she wasn't only 9 years old. Another voice murmured in response, noting her remarkable spirit for such a young age. The man, recovering slightly, retorted that he was the Marquis of the Perron family, his tone now laced with defiance. Alicia, unfazed, questioned if that was the extent of his thinking, implying that for a Marquis, his judgment of the ministers who served the empire was disappointingly low. A visible tremor ran through the assembled nobles. It seemed Her Majesty's assessment struck a nerve. Alicia pressed on, asking if being a confined princess somehow negated her imperial bloodline, and if they were, in fact, seeking a puppet emperor they could manipulate. The panicked Marquis stammered, vehemently denying that was his intention. Alicia thought to herself that they were completely overwhelmed by a mere 9-year-old child. Their desperation was palpable. Just then, Arnold Ertl, representing the Duke Ertl family, stood up. He addressed her respectfully, greeting, "Your Highness Princess." He stated that their concern was singular, her ability to bear the immense burden of the emperor's position. He elaborated that immediately placing a princess with no proven capabilities on the throne, especially amidst the ongoing war and widespread regional damage, seemed irrational. They needed someone capable of swiftly addressing these pressing issues. Rising to her feet, Alice inquired if he was questioning her qualifications to be empress. He confirmed, asking if she could demonstrate her suitability for the role. She responded that it would be no difficult task. With a light snap of her fingers, magical power in the air coalesced around her, creating a gentle, subtle breeze. Suddenly, Arnold began to float upwards, a look of fear spreading across his face. He stammered, asking what was happening. Alicia simply stated that he could now witness with his own eyes and then inform the others himself. In an instant, the scene shifted dramatically. Silence descended once more, the ministers frozen, staring at a point in empty space, unable to utter a word. Alicia had teleported herself and Arnold to another location. The ministers' faces slowly turned, one by one, in utter shock. Everyone was speechless. One finally broke the silence, asking if teleportation magic could be cast so swiftly. Another exclaimed that it was impossible, that he had never witnessed or even heard of such a feat. Yet another commented on the impressiveness of wielding such high-level magic without even a single magic circle, wondering if there had ever been a wizard of such talent in history. One minister remarked that while the emperor was not a magician, His Majesty had reached the level of a swordmaster at the same age. Another added, in astonishment, that she even resembled him at that age. Isabella, standing near the door, listened in stunned silence to the minister's odd comments about Alicia, culminating in their realization of her monstrous talent. The scene dissolved, transitioning to a desolate border village of the Eastern Empire. The entire area was in ruins. Alicia, having teleported herself and Arnold to this location, felt a twinge of worry, realizing it had been some time since she last used magic. However, she reassured herself that it was fine. She had initially believed she had completely lost her mana upon reincarnating, but now wondered how it had returned. Arnold, still floating slightly above the ground, asked if this was the border village. Alicia confirmed, explaining that she had deliberately chosen the closest point to the border. The extent of the damage was undeniably severe. Arnold then inquired what she planned to do there. Alicia began to walk amongst the rubble, observing the devastated town, filled with suffering people and the remnants of shattered buildings. She stopped, bending down to pick up a handful of dirt from the ground. Opening her palm, she breathed life into the soil resting there, channeling her magical power into it. Particles of dirt, lifted by the wind, began to glow with a golden light, spreading throughout the ravaged village. Those who suffered from injuries found themselves completely healed. Destroyed buildings began to reconstruct themselves, one by one, returning to their original forms. Scarce food supplies miraculously multiplied, overflowing with enough to feed countless people until they were full, with abundance to spare. Villagers who had been injured by the war were completely bewildered by the sudden recovery. Arnold, witnessing this miraculous transformation, was utterly perplexed. He stammered that it was impossible. Then, in the blink of an eye, Alicia vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind murmurs among the awestruck villagers, wondering if they had just witnessed a god. This was Alicia's miracle. Alicia reappeared in the meeting room with Arnold. One of the ministers, still reeling from shock, asked where she had been. She replied with quiet pride that she had completed all the repairs in the border region. The ministers were stunned. One exclaimed in disbelief, while another added that he couldn't believe it. The war had only ended yesterday, and she was claiming to have already finished the repairs. Turning to Arnold, another minister urged him to confirm if it was truly true. Arnold, still dazed by what he had witnessed, could only confirm the truth. All the repairs had been completed in an instant. He recounted to everyone how Her Highness had simply lifted her hand, and ruined buildings were restored, and food appeared in abundance. Alicia, observing their excited commotion, thought they were making so much noise over something so trivial. Her gaze then shifted to Isabella, who stood near the door. She walked towards her, but before departing, turned back to the ministers, stating that she did not expect them to fully acknowledge her based on this simple demonstration alone. She added that they could look forward to what was to come, she would show them even more. As Alicia walked beside Isabella, she noticed her nanny was visibly shaken. Alicia understood, it was indeed understandable. Years ago, the young princess who should have been born amidst blessings had instead begun her life with the death of her mother, the complete neglect of her father, and the resentment of the empire's people, fueled by furious protests. Isabella wondered what crime such a small and innocent child could have possibly committed to deserve such a fate. She fervently hoped Alicia wouldn't feel too alone, but she knew, deep down, that Alicia would never truly be alone, not while Isabella lived. She swore again to dedicate her life to Her Highness, to become her family. Isabella reflected on having served Her Highness closely for the past 9 years. She believed she was the one who understood Her Highness most intimately, yet the demeanor she now displayed was entirely new to her. Isabella was left questioning if this was truly the princess she had always known, wondering if Alicia had purposefully concealed her abilities all along. The thought even crossed her mind if Her Highness was not simply an ordinary human being. However, her train of thought was interrupted as Alicia, sensing her nanny's inner turmoil, gently took Isabella's hand and offered a warm smile. Alicia remarked that Isabella was undoubtedly quite taken aback and was about to explain the extraordinary events that had just transpired. However, Isabella interrupted her with a gentle smile, her gaze drifting towards the window. Isabella remarked on the welcome sight of the sun, the first sunny day in what felt like ages, inviting Her Highness to observe the pleasant weather. Alicia concurred with Isabella's observation, returning her smile. As Isabella looked at Alicia, she resolved that regardless of Her Highness's true nature, she would remain steadfastly by her side for as long as she lived. Alice understood Isabella's unspoken vow and offered a silent, heartfelt thank you. Alice calmly reflected on the changes since that day. From that day forward, deference was shown to her by everyone. They moved swiftly to restore the dilapidated imperial palace. Not only that, but her formal imperial education commenced in earnest. Having never received such instruction before, she had to rapidly absorb knowledge across all disciplines, a task that would have overwhelmed any ordinary child. However, for Alicia, it posed no challenge whatsoever. A knock sounded at the office door. At Alicia's permission, a man named Sunil entered, offering a respectful greeting. He had been appointed as the emperor's aide at the young age of 17 and had served alongside him for an impressive 7 years. Alicia mused that surviving under the notoriously grumpy and meticulous emperor without losing one's sanity was an achievement in itself. Sunil stated that, as per her instructions, they had ensured the news of His Majesty's death had not been leaked to the outside world. Alicia considered that with imperial authority still fragile, allowing news of the emperor's demise to spread would only create further instability. She affirmed his actions, stating it was prudent to avoid unnecessary complications, and considered that the funeral would be postponed for as long as possible. She inquired if Debian had arrived, and Sunil confirmed that the academic was already waiting in the reception room. She noted that he was early for once and instructed Sunil to send him in. Debian Broke, a noble wizard from the Magic Tower and her instructor in magical studies, entered. Alicia inquired as to what brought him there at this precise moment. For the first time, Debian expressed offense at her question. He declared that he always dedicated himself wholeheartedly to her lessons, and that day he had brought a magic formula. Alicia examined the formula and requested he explain it, implying he wasn't truly trying to teach her by presenting it, but rather seeking ready-made answers, asking if that wasn't the case. He retorted, questioning how she could assume he would dare to instruct Her Highness. He then requested she provide him with the answer. However, Alicia promptly set the formula paper ablaze, leaving him to cry out in despair. She ignored his dramatic reaction, knowing Debian well enough to expect he had a backup. As anticipated, he produced a copy, asking if this demonstrated how seriously he took their lessons. Alicia instructed him to hand it over and began to swiftly provide the answers while he watched with hopeful anticipation. Thinking aloud, she remarked that the emperor had been quite talented, asking if Debian agreed. He affirmed that His Majesty was indeed one of the few sword masters in the world. Yet, she pointed out, even such a powerful man had perished on the battlefield.
Debian agreed, stating it was no wonder his death had plunged the empire into chaos.
Debian mentioned he had heard that the enemy king had employed black magic against the emperor. According to his sources, during His Majesty's final battle, a massive wave of black magic had been directed at him. A sudden, immense explosion had engulfed the area. Alicia questioned this detail, and Debian elaborated that when the dust had settled, there was nothing left where His Majesty had been, nothing at all. A search party had been dispatched, but they had found no trace of him, leaving them with no choice but to presume him dead. Alicia reflected that regardless of his swordsmanship, he was ultimately just human. His body and soul had been completely consumed by black magic, making the chances of survival near zero. That night, as Isabella tucked her into bed, she wished her a good night's sleep, and Alicia reciprocated the wish. Once Isabella had left the room, Alicia ceased pretending to sleep and rose. She noticed a sheet of paper on the table and used her magic to levitate it towards her. She felt a pang of guilt towards Isabella, but since declaring herself empress, she had real responsibilities. Her attention turned to the series of child disappearances. Something about this case felt deeply unsettling. She read the report detailing the serial disappearances of children vanishing one after another near the imperial palace. All the victims were commoner children, with 6 children missing so far. She noted that it was already very late, and typically dangerous for a child like herself to be out and about, but a mischievous smile played on her lips as she thought it was also the perfect time for a child to be kidnapped. She then opened a portal of teleportation and stepped through. Alicia teleported to a deserted, silent alleyway. She began to cast magic, murmuring that it seemed she would have to use this method. Creating a ball of light, she released it, and the light began to move in multiple directions, searching for the missing children. Following her instincts, she directed the light further inward until it finally revealed a group of children locked behind bars. A delighted smile spread across her face at finding them. She immediately conjured a gate of teleportation. Alicia arrived floating and bathed in light where the children were imprisoned. The children were awestruck, and a boy with bright, hopeful eyes asked if she was an angel. Alicia gestured for him to be quiet and assured him she would get them out. Alicia descended to the floor and surveyed the scene. She recalled the report stating 6 children were missing, wondering if the kidnappers had captured more in the interim. She used magic to unlock the bars, musing if they were planning to use these children as slaves. Suddenly, 2 men appeared, rushing in and demanding to know what the loud noise was. They noticed the open bars and then Alicia. One man yelled, demanding to know how she had gotten in. She simply snapped her fingers, magically binding them, and they began to scream, demanding to be released and questioning what was happening. Ignoring their protests, Alicia turned to the children and instructed them to leave, asking if they didn't want to go home. The children remained hesitant. She inquired what was wrong. A girl raised her hand, explaining that they didn't know the way back. Alicia sighed heavily, then snapped her fingers again, teleporting everyone, including the kidnappers, to another location. She created a magical arrow of light and declared that if they followed it, they would all find their way home, asking if that was sufficient. The children nodded in confirmation. All the children held hands and followed the arrow as they waved goodbye to Alicia. She reminded them to be careful on their way. Alicia mused that it wasn't even that dense of a forest, wondering why the residents hadn't been able to find the children and if someone was deliberately covering their tracks. The next day, at the meeting with the nobles, one minister inquired if it was true that the princess had resolved the series of missing children cases. Another exclaimed, asking if the individuals now imprisoned underground were indeed the kidnappers. With a chuckle, Marquis Arnold confirmed it was exactly as reported, but they were still being interrogated as it appeared someone was orchestrating them. Another man turned to the Marquis and asked what he found so amusing. Marquis Arnold countered, asking why he shouldn't be pleased. Her Highness had resolved a significant problem for them. Another man slammed his hand on the table, rising to his feet and declaring that since the war, the empire had been unstable, but now the princess herself was taking control of the situation, asking if this wasn't extraordinary. Another noble agreed, questioning if this wasn't sufficient proof of her capabilities. However, others remained somewhat apprehensive. The enthusiastic man continued, proclaiming that the empire was ready for a new sun to rise. Meanwhile, in the underground prison where the kidnappers were held, Alicia stood on the other side of the bars, instructing them to start talking. She inquired if their sponsor was connected to illegal slave traders. One of the criminals feigned ignorance, claiming to not know what she was talking about. However, Dark Alicia stated she was asking politely, as she wished to give them one last chance. She implied she had numerous ways of extracting information. The men began to grow fearful, until one blurted out that they couldn't reveal anything. If they divulged any information, they would suffer a fate worse than death, and she didn't understand how cruel this woman was. At that moment, he was abruptly silenced by a sharp pain. He began to choke and cough up blood, collapsing. Alicia recoiled slightly, stepping back in confusion, asking if he was dead. An evil smile crept across her face as she murmured that things were becoming interesting. As the sun began to set, Alicia decided to venture out to conduct her own investigation. Instead of appearing as a child, this time she transformed into an adult form to facilitate her infiltration more easily. She gazed intently in one direction. Alicia pondered if the Grand Casino, located at the edge of the shopping district, was the correct place. She recalled the kidnappers' memory suggesting a clandestine auction, a hub for the illegal slave trade, operated within the casino. She questioned the motive behind concealing such an operation from the imperial family. Her goal was to capture the woman at the helm of this illicit business. Suddenly, a person bumped into her. The man apologized, but Alicia felt a strange sensation. She sensed a magical presence, a dark magic intertwined with his mana. Dismissing it as inconsequential, she ignored it, deciding it wasn't her concern as she had to reach her destination. Arriving at the casino, she noticed guards inspecting the magical tools of those entering. Alicia sighed, finding their methods amateurish and ineffective, confident they wouldn't detect her magic. After a perfunctory check, they allowed her entry. Inside, people were already placing bets in various games. Amidst the gaming tables, Alicia overheard a conversation that caught her attention. One person asked another if a specific item was all that was needed to participate in the auction. The man confirmed, stating it had been very difficult to obtain. Alicia recognized it was a golden ticket. She swiftly cloned the ticket. Approaching a man, she presented the duplicated ticket, requesting to be shown the way. The man examined the ticket. Alicia then inquired if he planned to mentor her after the auction, to which he nervously denied, quickly stating he would take her there immediately. He led her to a restricted area, and upon arrival, told her to enjoy herself. Alicia smiled, affirming she would, understanding she had reached the underground auction of the casino. Alicia used invisibility magic to peek behind a door before the auction began. She observed a man carrying items for auction, initially assuming they were items affordable only by low-income families. However, she was surprised to see even royal possessions among them. Suddenly, she heard someone apologizing to the count. Looking further ahead, she saw it was a woman. The woman explained to the count that the men meant to prepare the children had been captured by the royal family. The count criticized her for employing incompetent fools. The woman replied that since the war ended, the empire's forces had apparently been replenished. She reassured him that her younger brother had prepared something special for today and asked the count to relax. Alicia wondered if this red-haired woman was the one behind everything. The woman picked up a bottle filled with a lilac liquid, showing it to the count. The count was pleased and asked how her brother managed to consistently obtain such precious items every month. The woman laughed, saying she couldn't reveal that secret. The count said he understood, as long as he received the products, that was all that mattered. After they left, Alicia took the bottle. She realized it contained Cloudbox, a drug only dark wizards could create. It was extremely rare among humans, as black magic itself was a power that devoured life and the soul, forbidden to humans by divine will. Furthermore, Cloudbox was difficult to create even for skilled dark wizards, unless a truly exceptional, first-rate dark sorcerer had been born. Someone announced that the auction was scheduled to start soon and requested all participants to take their places if they wished to participate. Alicia realized their operation was on a much larger scale than she had anticipated. She took her seat, waiting for the auction to begin. The red-haired woman took the stage as the presenter. She expressed her gratitude and welcomed all the esteemed guests. Introducing herself as Kira, the host of the auction, she thanked everyone for waiting and presented the first item, a ruby sculpture, said to contain divine blessings. Alicia was stunned, recognizing it as the national treasure of the Kingdom of Lorit, a kingdom far from the empire, known as the Heart of the 12th Bell. Although a small nation, it was still a sovereign state.
Auctioning off a country's national treasure was audacious. Kara announced the start of the auction, and bids began, increasing rapidly.
Alicia decided it was time to intervene.
Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging everyone into darkness and desperation. People cried out, asking what was happening. Kira asked them to wait, claiming there was a problem that would be resolved soon, urging the esteemed guests to remain seated. But then, several flashes of light appeared, intensifying the panic. People cried out in despair, until they noticed someone on stage holding the ruby sculpture, asking who Kira was. Kira, shaking with rage, demanded to know who she was. Alicia told Kira that it was irrelevant. Stealing a national treasure, no matter how small the country, indicated significant power. She asked who else she could be and presented a document, declaring she was from the imperial palace, there to capture illegal auctioneers. People began to panic, realizing she was sent by the imperial palace. Someone asked if they should run, and everyone started fleeing, shouting they didn't want to be taken into custody. Alicia remarked that while entering, they were free to run if they wished, but leaving was a different matter. She created a symbol with chains, magically sealing the door. Turning to Kira, she demanded how she dared to hold an illegal auction within the empire. Kira remained silent. Suddenly, the Count pushed through the crowd towards Alicia, commenting on her youthful appearance at first glance and accusing her of pretending to be from the imperial palace to disrupt the auction. He snatched the document from her hands, asking where she had obtained the fake and how she dared to interfere. She asked if he thought it was fake. He retorted, asking if she thought he wouldn't know the emperor was dead. Alicia replied she didn't believe anyone would be foolish enough to speak so recklessly without fear of the imperial family. He insisted that currently, no one in the imperial family could stamp the imperial seal. However, Alicia removed her hood, revealing her silver hair, reflecting that even a humble earl should know that possessing the silver seal signified imperial blood. He became terrified upon seeing her silver hair and fell to the ground in panic. Looking at him with a smile, Alicia commented on the unfortunate turn of events, noting that someone still possessed the authority to stamp the imperial seal after all. Alicia returned home in the dead of night. Suddenly, Isabella surprised her, picking her up and hugging her worriedly, asking where she had been all this time. Alicia dismissed it as nothing, while internally acknowledging she had just infiltrated the illegal market and disrupted everything. Isabella set her down, crouched, and held her hand, telling Her Highness that she had felt very uncomfortable and worried lately. Alicia asked why and what was going on, and if someone was bothering her. Isabella replied that someone she had served for 9 years was wandering through dangerous places without a single guard. Alicia realized Isabella was referring to herself. Isabella said that at the very least, it would be nice if she let her know where she was going. Alicia said she understood and that everything was fine, promising to tell her from now on. Isabella was happy and considered it a promise. By the way, she told Alicia that the council had been looking for her and that Sunil said he had something to reveal. The next day, Alicia went to Sunil's office, asking why he had been looking for her. He said the ministers were waiting for her in the conference room. She was confused and asked why. He said they claimed to have something urgent to tell her, murmuring that it was probably about her coronation, as she had demonstrated her abilities quite a lot recently. She asked Sunil, and while he visibly shivered, she asked if he would stay by her side. A drop of sweat ran down Sunil's face. Alicia reflected that he had always followed her orders without question, but she wasn't sure if his loyalty was truly to her. After all, he was the emperor's man, chosen and placed by the emperor. Alicia decided she would soon know if his words were true or not, instructing him to tell her the truth, kneeling. Sunil knelt and declared that for the security and peace of the empire, there was only one thing he must do, which was serving the son of the empire. Alicia was pleased, thinking it was as expected, he never disappointed her. Then she said that was enough. By the way, she said she had something else to do,
and he asked her to give her orders. She said it seemed that one of the palace servants had been taking money and leaking information about the inner workings of the palace. Sunil apologized to Her Highness, but Alicia said it was not something for him to apologize for, as she had already captured that bastard count and locked him in prison. She instructed him to find out who had taken the money and started spreading nonsense.
He indicated his understanding.
Now, she was informed that she should join the ministers, who were undoubtedly waiting anxiously in the conference room.
Upon Alicia's entrance, the ministers, who appeared quite distressed, immediately noticed her.
Everyone rose to their feet and greeted Her Imperial Highness. Princess Alicia took her seat in the central armchair and inquired about the purpose of their summons. One of the men began to speak, expressing the imperial minister's hope that a new sun would brightly illuminate the empire, which had fallen into darkness. He implored her to rise like the sun and safeguard the empire. All the ministers bowed their heads and placed their hands on their chests, simultaneously declaring, "Rise like the sun and watch over the empire."
Alicia remained silent for a moment.
Her ascension to the throne was virtually assured. She turned to the finance minister and instructed him to make preparations for the coronation. Later, in her room, Isabella was attending to Alicia's hair. At one point, Alicia looked up at her. Isabella asked if she was feeling weary, but Alicia was thinking about how, when the former emperor confined her and everyone else abandoned her, Isabella was the only one who remained steadfastly by her side. She then said to Isabella that she would become the empress. She reflected that in this place, which felt like a grand prison, only Isabella had truly cared for her.
Isabella knelt and took her hand, expressing her unwavering belief that Her Highness was always right.
She urged her to follow the path she desired.
Alicia smiled warmly, considering Isabella her only true family, and thanked her.
Isabella brushed it off as her duty and declared that if anyone dared to oppose Her Highness's will, she would be the first to step forward and strike down that person. Alicia found this amusing, trying to suppress her laughter but ultimately failing, erupting into hearty laughter. Finally, the coronation day arrived. After Isabella finished preparing Alicia, she positioned her in front of the mirror, remarking on how truly magnificent she looked. Alicia simply responded with a playful, "Of course," asking who else she thought she was, while Isabella continued to adjust her attire.
Alicia then called out Isabella's name. Isabella asked if she was feeling unwell.
But turning to her with a smile, Alicia declared that from this day forward, she would ensure Isabella's genuine happiness. Isabella became emotional, stating that simply being by her side at this moment was the happiest she could be.
An attendant informed Her Highness that all preparations were complete.
Alicia then prepared to depart, confidently announcing, "I am leaving now." After 9 long years of obscurity, she was finally stepping into the light. Upon entering the coronation room, everyone saluted her as the sole princess of the empire. Alicia walked confidently past the ministers, thinking that after the ceremony, she would no longer be addressed as princess but as empress.
Today was the day.
She approached the altar and knelt before the priest, who held the crown. She was about to become the new sun of this empire. And so, the priest commenced the coronation of the first servant of God, standing in place of divine will, to bestow the symbol of the emperor upon the new sun. However, as he was about to place the crown upon her head, he paused, hearing a noise.
Suddenly, a loud bang echoed, and a section of the wall exploded.
Debris flew everywhere, but Alicia swiftly created a protective barrier around herself and the priest. Despite the chaos, Alicia remained composed. She knew that such a significant disruption could not be orchestrated by just anyone.
Someone approached.
Alicia slightly turned her head, a cold voice reaching her ears, saying that during his brief absence, someone had dared to covet his throne. He halted darkly behind her and voiced his curiosity to see who this audacious fool was. Now, he was observing a rather intriguing face. The ministers were in disarray, exclaiming "His Imperial Majesty," and greeting him with gasps. Alicia thought to herself that these old fools had been calling her the new sun just moments ago. She stood up, addressing her father, and apologized, saying that as this was their first meeting, she hadn't recognized him. She lightly held her dress as she bowed with her hand on her chest, stating it was an honor to meet her father, Revetsor, greeting him as his daughter, Alicia.
The emperor walked past her and ordered for her to be taken away.
However, Alicia remarked that he had a bad temper, causing the emperor to stop in his tracks. Even the priest was shocked and, becoming frightened, accidentally dropped the crown to the floor, feigning innocence. Alicia turned to her father and questioned if he had just spoken his thoughts aloud. The emperor frowned with hatred and demanded how she dared. He drew his sword and swung it towards her neck, accusing her of not only defying the emperor's decree but also leaving the imperial princess's palace and daring to covet his throne. Alicia calmly stated that the empire was in turmoil, and as the princess, she couldn't remain idle. The emperor retorted that it seemed she wasn't even afraid of death and asked if she was truly that foolish, dripping with irony.